Board of Mayor and Aldermen on Monday, January 28th, here in the council chambers at City Hall in Germantown. We welcome all those that are here present, those that are also watching or streaming as well. A few highlights about this evening's meeting. We'll have two special recognition items on the agenda this evening, a Teacher of the Month, and as you probably noticed, we've got a bunch of football players in here. We're going to honor the Red Devils of Germantown High School. Also this evening, we will recess as a Board of Mayor and Aldermen and constitute ourselves as a beer board and hear an application as well. This evening, we'll also have a legal agreement for services on the agenda. In a moment, we will have the invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance, but before that, we will honor this evening a moment of silence honoring the late Neil Sherman, who passed away over the weekend. Neil's a longtime resident in the city of Germantown, a decorated veteran, pastor, and a mentor for many of us, served on city commissions for 25 years, leadership Germantown graduate, a great servant, a mentor, a friend. So this evening we will honor him with a moment of silence. Please rise. Thank you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for Mr. Sherman and his life and just ask for your blessings upon his family. We just ask for your blessings to be here among us tonight as we conduct the business of this great city. We just pray for these leaders as they deliberate and make decisions tonight, Lord, that you'd give them wisdom and give them the direct path, Lord, to the best possible answer. We just ask, Lord, that you'd be with us through the remainder of this night and through this week as the temperatures drop and some will be hungry and cold. We just ask, Lord, that you'd put in our minds a desire to help those that are in need. We pray these things in your precious name. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Brings us to item 4 on the agenda this evening, setting of the agenda. The agenda is published and presented to the public prior to our board meeting. The board meets in executive session at 5:30 and thoroughly reviews the consent agenda and the entire agenda. At that time, the board had a willingness to pull item 10D from the consent agenda, purchase for Germantown Performing Arts Center theater seating. That item will go on the regular agenda this evening. Also during executive session, there was a willingness to move item 12, the fiscal year 2020 budget calendar. That will replace item 10D, and now item 12 will be the former 10D, purchase of GPAC theater seating. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as modified?
Move to approve.
There's a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Young?
Yes. Thank you. The agenda has been set for this evening. The public was presented with the minutes to the meeting of January the 14th, 2019. During executive session, there were no corrections or modifications of the minutes at that time. Are there any currently? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented to the public?
Move to approve.
Is a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Minutes from January 14th have been approved. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda this evening, citizens to be heard. Clerk Betty, any requests this evening? That concludes citizens to be heard for this evening. That brings us to item 7 on the agenda, special recognition. 7A is Germantown Education Commission Teacher of the Month for January of 2019, and item B is a proclamation for GHS Red Devil football. Both of those will be led by our Vice Mayor, Mary Ann Gibson. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. We are joined by Education Commission members Scott Williams, Manjeet Kaur, and Stephen Chandler. And if I could ask Ms. Laura Dotson to come forward. It is an honor for the Germantown Education Commission to present the January 2019 Teacher of the Month Award to Ms. Laura Dotson. Ms. Dotson teaches kindergarten at Farmington Elementary School, where she has made a difference in her students' lives for the past 4 years. It is clear to the Commission that she has a passion for teaching. She demonstrates excellence every day in her interactions with her students, their parents, and her peers. Ms. Dotson is active in the Farmington community, supporting Farmington Elementary's Falcon Fest, the Multicultural Festival, and Kindergarten Camp. She always goes the extra mile, whether it's helping a child master a new skill, arriving early and staying late to meet with parents, or volunteering her time to the community. Active in her church, Ms. Dotson teaches Vacation Bible School and serves wherever she can put her teaching talents to use. She is also an active volunteer for the Salvation Army and has the privilege of being one of Santa's helpers during the holidays, distributing Christmas gifts to children in the community. She is an asset to her students, the Farmington family, and the entire Germantown community. Ms. Dotson, your award is sponsored by Iberia Bank. Please accept our appreciation for your commitment to Germantown students and to excellence every day. Thank you so much.
We do congratulate you, Ms. Dotson, and we appreciate all the work that you bring to your classroom and to Farmington, and we are just so thrilled and proud of you. So I would ask that the Coach Smith and maybe your coaching staff and your team captains to maybe come forward. I know you have your whole team here. We may not be able to get them all across the front, but if those gentlemen could come forward, it would be great. Sorry, Vice Mayor.
It's perfect. Thank you, Mayor. And if I could actually have the team members stand while this proclamation is read. I'm joined by fellow alumni of Germantown High School, Alderman Owens and Alderman Yonda. And as a proud Red Devil of the class of 1983, it is with great pride that I read this proclamation. Whereas the Germantown High School Red Devils football team went undefeated at 10-0 in the regular season, beating 2018 runner-up 6A and 2017 state champion Whitehaven in the final regular season game, finished at number 5 in the AP 6A state football poll, and are the 2017-2018 6A Region 8 champions, with the first back-to-back undefeated season since 1996. And whereas the Red Devils scored 481 points, had over 4,450 yards of total offense, and made 80 touchdowns. The defense surrendered only 151 points and created 154 tackles for loss, 35 turnovers, and 54 sacks. And whereas the Red Devils have 15 all-region players, the Region 8 Coach of the Year, Chris Smith, the Shelby Sun-Times Team of the Year, a 6A Mr. Football finalist, Cameron Baker, and ABC Channel 24's Scholar Athlete of the Week, Ethan Payne, with a 4.3 GPA. And whereas the Red Devils will have graduated nearly 80 players from high school who played in the football program for the past 2 seasons. And yet this same Germantown football team expects to compete for the football state championship in Tennessee this year. And whereas the Germantown football program ranked 5,398th when Coach Chris Smith took over the program and ranked as high as 248 at the end of the regular season. And whereas currently 9 players have college scholarship offers, and whereas the Red Devils are 9-time Team of the Week across multiple media outlets, and were nominated twice for the Tennessee Titans Game of the Week. Now, therefore, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen of the City of Germantown takes great pride in honoring the Germantown High School Red Devils football team and hereby proclaims January 28th, 2019 as Germantown High School Football Day.
This will go in my office next to my football helmet that you signed for us last year. Thank you, Red Devils. We're very proud of you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, gentlemen.
Congratulations again, Red Devils, as you march out. It sounds like you've got some future Red Devils in the audience with all these kids. They're ready to play soon. We'll take a moment as people gather out before we continue with item 8 on the agenda. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda this evening, Aldermen Liaison Reports. We move through from position 1 through 5. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. The Beautification Commission would like to remind the public of our annual Arbor Day event scheduled for Friday, March the 1st at 9 a.m. at Germantown Crossing Shopping Center on the corner of Farmington and Germantown in front of Huey's. We'll have 800 free Sweet Bay magnolias, red buds, and 3 variety of dogwood trees, the Coosa, Silky, and the White, available for residents as quantities last. We also will have our fruit tree sale that takes place on Arbor Day. More information will be furnished to the public on February 1st on the city's website. We hope to see everyone there. That will be the end of my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Library Board has this to report. As many of you already know, it is our Tennessee's busiest public library. We are excited about our award-winning summer reading program, but we need the help of the community. We need prizes for all ages. Prizes must be approved by April 22nd of this year and received at the library by May 1st. So if you would, please contact the Germantown Community Library if you would like to be a part of that, especially our business community. The library, in partnership with the city, kicked off the Big Read, with events taking place throughout the city focusing on the book The Namesake by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Jhumpa Lahiri. Senator Brian Kelsey presented a grant to the Tennessee Genealogical Center from the Tennessee Historical Records Advisory Board. This grant will be used to catalog audio recordings from veterans connected with the Memphis Belle. The Public Art Commission met a few weeks ago for the first time and is excited about moving forward and bringing art into our public spaces within the city. The Germantown Education Commission announced that the Battle of the Brains will again provide a competitive playing field for groups of students interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. All students from Germantown High School and Houston High School, regardless of residency, are eligible to participate. High school students who live in Germantown but attend a school outside of the city or who participate in homeschool may also compete. The competition will be Saturday, March 30th, and it will give students several months to research and prepare their projects. The Neighborhood Preservation Commission also met. They are beginning the planning season for the very successful and informative tour of remodeled homes to be held on April 28th. Our Parks and Recreation Commission, the report there, we held the January business meeting last Thursday evening. At the mayor's request, the commission set a date of Saturday, February 9th at 9 a.m. at the Pickering Center to hold a special work session to explore the potential of the Germantown Country Club property as public space. The work session will be designed to determine whether or not the property purchase would support the long-range Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was adopted last year. The commission also voted unanimously to reconvene the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Steering Committee to assist in the process. The meeting will be facilitated by the authors of the Parks and Rec Master Plan, who will also publish a report of work session outcomes to the mayor or for the mayor and board of aldermen. Citizens who would also like to express their thoughts on this matter are asked to do so on the city's website. The link is there for you. All those written comments will be recorded and considered during the special work session, so please do that. Mayor, the Board of Zoning Appeals will not be meeting in February as there were no applications submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Massey.
Mayor, the Historic Commission met last week, and the city historian, Andy Pouncey, also serves as a volunteer on the commission. Mr. Pouncey and our chair proposed disbanding the citizen-led Historic Commission in favor of allowing a private 501(c) to provide the services that the citizens would otherwise provide as part of the Historic Commission. The decision was made to postpone that vote, but it is something that will be coming up again in the future. The other thing that was discussed is the possibility of building a museum, a Germantown museum, as part of the Parks Master Plan. So that's something else that the Historic Commission will be considering in the future.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Owens.
Thanks, Mayor. January 22nd, the Design Review Commission met. Amongst other items, there was a review of the site plan for the field house and concession stand at Houston High School, a revised Chili's storefront, as well as a revised storefront and signage for Target.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Yonda.
I know it's hard to believe I have a report. I actually have two of them. Environmental Commission report.
Go ahead.
Environmental Commission report. Besides the normal first meeting duties, filling out our different forms, we discussed the Public Works wish list for capital improvements. While each commissioner gives a report on their environmental findings inside and outside the community, one of the most extremely interesting things is Kroger's phasing out of the single-use plastic bags in their stores by 2025. My next report's on the Financial Advisory Commission. Again, we're filling out the customary forms and guidelines for membership. We also had a round of introductions, discussed our mission, and formed a subcommittee in case the Parks and Rec Commission decides on some action concerning a financial need for the Germantown Country Club. It seems to be in our reports today, doesn't it? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. And just quickly from the mayor's office, I'd like to personally recognize and thank Emily Westbrook and Sanja Butler. Both have reported multiple reports from citizens and compliments for superb and exceptional and very confident customer service. The board, if you get an opportunity to thank these ladies, they serve on People Street, and trust me, they keep a lot of phone calls and emails coming your way. Really, the dynamic duo, they handle just about everything that comes in the front door, and they do so with grace and with great confidence and also with a lot of professionalism. So thank you, Emily and Sanja. Please pass that along to those two individuals. Also, the Memphis Area Association of Realtors data for the year came in, and for the year end that ended 2018, our sales prices were still very robust in Germantown. The average sales price for a home in Germantown rose 6.2% over 2017. New home sales were up 11.2%, with the average new home sale in Germantown was $835,221 in 2018. Also, even more remarkable, the amount of bank sales. Those are homes that go into foreclosure and they're often sold at the courthouse steps. There were only 9 in our city when we have about 15,000 households as well. And just to conclude, I just showed this to the chief. It came across, literally across the wire moments ago. The National Council for Safety and Security rated its Tennessee safest cities, and Chief, you and your staff were rated #1 in the state. Our friends to the east were rated 4th, and our friends to the west were 49th. So we're number 1. Great job, Chief. We appreciate that very much. That concludes Alderman liaison reports and reports from the mayor's office as well. We are now in recess as a Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and we are now convened as a beer board and hear business as a beer board in Germantown. Tonight we'll have a public hearing for a beer permit for on-premise application from Whitlow's. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor and Board.
Mayor, before we
Yes.
begin, as I mentioned in the executive session, I'm going to recuse myself and step down.
Thank you, Alderman Massey. Let the record state that Alderman Massey is recusing himself from item 9 and has left the dais. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. The City of Germantown has received a request from Michael Anthony Westmoreland for a permit to sell beer for on-premise consumption at a new restaurant by the name of Whitlow's located at 7642 Poplar Pike. If you're not familiar with that, it's the older, probably one of the older homes in Germantown, located directly across from Germantown High School. Per the city's ordinance, the necessary background checks have been completed on the application. The application is complete. The background checks are done on all 4 of the individuals associated with the application, and nothing has come back to discredit them. They're also, their location is also consistent with the permitted zoning in this area, the OG zoning, and the proper public notice was placed in the newspaper advertising this public hearing this evening. Based on all of that, Mayor and Board, the administration recommends approval. And I believe the applicants are with us this evening.
Thank you for your presentation. Is there a motion to approve the request of Michael Anthony Westmoreland for a permit to sell beer for on-premise consumption at Whitlow's located at 7642 Poplar Pike?
Move to approve.
Is a motion?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. The question is now officially on the floor. At this time, I will open a public hearing. A public hearing is now open to speak to this particular item on the agenda. Anyone who wishes to come forward and speak on on-premise application at Whitlow's for a beer permit, please step forward. Second call for anyone who would like to speak on this particular item on the agenda, please come forward and be heard. Third and final call, seeing no one come forward, that concludes a public hearing on this particular item. The applicants are sitting in the front, and the floor is open for any questions or discussion. Alderman Yonda.
Yes, what's the procedure for underage drinking and keeping it from happening?
That's our
normal question.
And just come forward and state your name. You're Mr. Westmoreland, I take it. Just state your name and address for the record.
I'm Michael Anthony Westmoreland. I live at 2331 Pikewood Avenue in English Meadows. So with that being said, we own a few restaurants in the city, and we're planning on this being an upscale restaurant. So all of our staff are going to be professional service staff, bartending staff. We don't plan on hiring anyone that doesn't have a few years' experience behind them. Plus, all of our servers are certified through the ABC board. So we've got some pretty high standards as far as that goes. Everybody's carded if they don't look like they're 40 years old or older.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant or for staff? Vice Mayor?
Mr. Westmoreland, one, thank you for being interested in Old Germantown. That is a special place. I did have a question. One of the things that had come up with a previous applicant that was actually for a design when they first came into being, when they wanted to open their business. Their questions were related because they were so close to that high school about their prospects or plans for the future with serving alcohol. They were on the opposite side of the street from where your property is, but again, very close. And so in the way that you have planned for this business, I would imagine that you're not going to be catering to students. That's not your business model. Is that correct?
Absolutely, no ma'am. This is an upscale restaurant, and we don't plan on being open for lunch service either, so we won't interfere with the high school traffic.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant? It's been properly moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
The motion carries. You have approval for your beer permit for on-premise application. I will say, I know there are other parts of the process that you have to go through, DRC and other things as well. I live in your neighborhood, or you live in my neighborhood, and I look forward to walking there. And I'll be honest with you, it's really caught me by surprise, but it's a pleasant surprise. I will also say this to you: if you'd like to stay for the rest of our meeting, you're welcome, or you may leave at this time. Well, welcome to Germantown, and we do appreciate you doing business in Germantown. I think that area of the city is going to become Restaurant Row, with 4 restaurants already at Old Germantown Road and Poplar Pike, and so a 5th will make it even more prominent, and hopefully there'll be more coming. So thank you again. That concludes the business for the Beer Board. We conclude and end the Beer Board this evening, and we come out of, or back from recess, and are now a Board of Mayor and Aldermen. As such, we will look at the consent agenda at this time. The consent agenda was thoroughly reviewed in executive session by the board. Those items included item 10A, donation for Germantown Education Foundation, Friend of the Foundation, for the 2nd quarter. Item 10B, donation Parks and Recreation. Item 10C, purchase City Hall chiller repairs. Item 10D was formerly item 12 on the agenda. That is fiscal year 2020 budget calendar. Item 10E, purchase printing and mailing services. Item 10F, purchase repair to high service pumps number 2 and 7 at Southern Avenue Water Treatment Plant. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified?
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Just a comment, Mayor, if I could. Just to make note of the donations to the Parks and Recreation Commission, Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare, the Germantown Women's Club, the residents at Thornwood, all of these, and then also I know that Campbell's Clinic is in there. I was going to find it. All of those donations are so vitally important to the programs that we put on in our parks, and so I just did want to take note of that, as well as the donation for the Friends of the Library. That Friends of board is true in every sense of that word. Since the inception of the board in 2006, they've given hundreds of thousands of dollars to that community library. So I just wanted to make note and say thank you.
Well put. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Consent agenda is approved. That brings us to item 11A on the agenda, Great Hall and Conference Center Advisory Commission. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. On December 18th, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen met in the administrative conference room to make the appointments to the various boards and commissions that serve in an advisory capacity to the mayor and the other elected officials. There were some areas that were not complete at that time, and we're bringing those back to you at this point. The first one is for the Great Hall and Conference Center Advisory Commission. You have 2 members who are currently on that commission have reapplied, Melanie Ost and John Wagner. However, if you look at the format for the individuals to fill this per the ordinance that established the Great Hall and Conference Center, they must fill one of those 7 areas as identified on your agenda sheet under the proposed motion. You have attached to your agenda sheet several applications of folks who have expressed an interest in serving on this commission.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Alderman Massey, this is your liaisonship. Would you like to make a motion and insert the names in each one of the 7 categories for the record?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
I'd like to nominate Suzanne Riley to the catering position, John Wagner to the corporate business position, John Payton for marketing, Tony Green, operations, Lauren Boutwell, retail, Russ Holland for sales, and Melanie Ost for hospitality.
I'm going to ask you to go one more time, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so go start with 1.
1 is Suzanne Riley.
Go slow. All right, go ahead.
2 is John Wagner.
Okay,
3 is John Payton.
thank you.
4 is Tony Green. 5 is Lauren Boutwell. 6 is Russ Holland. And 7 would be Melanie Ost.
Thank you. That comes forward in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Discussion, debate. Alderman Yonda.
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment to this proposed motion to approve the following appointments, and only these appointments at this time, to the Great Hall and Conference Center Commission: Melanie Ost, Lauren Botwell, John Wagner, and Russ Holland.
Okay, could you repeat those again, please?
Melanie Ost, Lauren Botwell, John Wagner, and Russ Holland. Need a second.
One moment, please. Would Melanie Ost be in hospitality, Lauren Botwell in retail, John Wagner in corporate business, and who was the last person?
Russ Holland.
In sales?
Yes.
Okay. That's been brought forth as an amendment in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been brought forth as a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Sure.
Alderman Massey.
Mayor, historically, we have all respected the nominations of our colleagues. I am the only alderman that's going to be working with these folks as part of the commission, unless we bring something forward. But from meeting to meeting, I will be the person that interacts with these folks, and I nominated them. I can work well with them. I think if we do this, it may actually prevent us from having a quorum once more. I don't know that 4 will present us with a quorum. It certainly will make it difficult to have enough people at the meetings. Not sure why Alderman Yonda wouldn't want Suzanne Riley or John Payton or Tony Green on the commission. I think their backgrounds qualify them. And we have never really been overly strict about who served on this commission. Frankly, we have had difficulties finding enough people to serve, and so I did quite a bit of work trying to get people to serve, and these people agreed. And I think that we should give them credit and respect for agreeing to serve, and I think, I personally would appreciate it if my alderman that my fellow aldermen would respect the choices as I respected their choices of who they wanted to serve, unless there was some legal reason, a large problem that I felt, should keep somebody from serving. I think there was only one instance of that. So I'll just conclude my remarks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alderman Sanders.
I agree somewhat with Alderman Massey. This is not a policy-making board, and I've read over these applications. I believe these individuals are qualified to serve on this commission, and I do believe the community would benefit from having a full commission.
Thank you. Anyone else? Vice Mayor.
Just a comment in regarding Alderman Massey's statement. Historically, when one has felt like they needed to pull a slate or pull a selected appointee off, other aldermen can certainly challenge that, and just would remind you of the fact that that did happen at that special called meeting. And so I just want to make that clear and transparent, that you did challenge several of those appointments. So again, not to beat that, but go ahead.
Thank you. Any other comments on this particular motion?
Well, Mayor, I'd just like a point of clarification, I think, to Alderman Gibson's point, because I think it's misleading to say that I challenged several. I did challenge one who I felt like violated campaign laws. But other than that, I don't think I challenged anyone, and I felt like that was, if somebody's breaking a law and doing things that are bad for the community, and it seems reasonable to challenge them on those grounds. But I haven't heard any challenge to these folks on any reasonable grounds. So I don't even know why we're not accepting these folks. If somebody can offer, a valid reason to not accept them as my appointments, I'll be glad to listen, but I haven't heard anything. It's just I don't want them on the commission, and I don't think that is reasonable justification to prevent a citizen from serving when they've volunteered.
Any other questions or discussion on this particular item? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
No.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Motion carries. Ms. Ost, Botwell, Wagner, and Holland are appointed to the Great Hall and Conference Center. I would name John Wagner as chairman. Brings us to item 11B on the agenda. Historic Commission appointments. Mr. Long.
Mayor and members of the board, similar to the discussion the board had in December 18th, when you considered the boards and commission appointments to these advisory capacity, the board did not appoint members to the Historic Commission. You have 3 vacancies on the Historic Commission, and you have 2 individuals who have reapplied to serve in that capacity, Ms. Dale Hicks and Ms. Karen Rice. Attached to the agenda sheet are other applications of folks who have expressed an interest in serving on this commission.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Alderman Massey, you are the liaison to Historic Commission. Would you like to make your suggestions for nominations in the form of a motion?
I would like to make a motion to nominate Sidney Kuhn, Marlene Strube, and Sarah Freeman.
I'll second that motion.
It's been a motion that's been brought forward to appoint Sidney Kuhn, Marlene Strube, and Sarah Freeman to serve on the Historic Commission with a term ending December 31st, 2019. It's been brought forward in the form of a motion and a second. The floor is open for discussion. Alderman Owens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment to that motion, please. I'd like to nominate the following members to the Historic Commission. Having previously served on that Historic Commission, I've worked closely with Dale Hicks and Karen Rice. I know them to be excellent candidates. They have served with dignity and have a wealth of knowledge and years of service that they bring to the table. They provided great leadership on that commission, and so I would nominate Dale Hicks and Karen Rice. And then I know that David Jackson serves on the Germantown Museum Board, and I think it would be helpful to have a tie from the Historic Commission to that museum board, so I nominate David Jackson as the 3rd member to the Historic Commission.
It's been brought forward an amendment to nominate Dale Hicks, Karen Rice, and David Jackson to the Historic Commission for a term ending December 31st, 2019. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on this particular item?
Sure, Mayor.
Go ahead, Alderman Massey.
So once again, I would simply ask that the board respect my nominees. These are the people that I will serve with. Alderman Owens won't be serving with these folks on the Historic Commission. There have been other instances where I served with on commissions, and there were folks that had partisan leanings, frankly, and it creates quite a bit of problem for the Alderman liaison who is trying to conduct business. I'm not saying that everybody needs to necessarily agree on everything, but if you have someone who is a very partisan person serving, it can create problems and it can affect the workflow. This was another commission where we simply did not have enough people apply to serve on the commission, or some of the people who applied for the Historic Commission got placed on other commissions. And we made an effort to allow people to serve on a commission, and in doing that, we said we'd try to appoint them to one commission and only one commission, so that there wasn't one applicant serving on multiple commissions. So I went out into the community and I asked people to serve, with the understanding that I needed 3 people to serve on the Historic Commission. And I talked to Sidney Kuhn, who said he had gotten his application in late and intended to apply for the Historic Commission and just didn't have time. Marlene Strube has an excellent background. She is a longtime resident of Germantown. And Sarah Freeman is actually a history professor. She understands how to actually archive historic documents. And I think her knowledge would be invaluable to the commission, quite frankly. And again, she is really the most qualified person that applied and probably would serve on the commission possibly all time. So I think it would be a real loss if we didn't have Ms. Freeman on the commission. The other, Karen Rice and Dell Hicks, I talked to the clerk earlier, and she doesn't know when or who delivered, when those applications were delivered or who delivered them. So it raises the question, you know, these Karen and Dale are both members who were on the commission in the past, and they chose not to apply this year, yet their application suddenly appeared on the clerk's desk without any date stamp, without any knowledge of who provided them or how they got there. And so the question is why? And, you know, the last time we made a real big issue about not voting on Marlene Strube and Sarah Freeman, or the rest of the board made an issue of not voting on Marlene Strube and Sarah Freeman, said we didn't get the application in time. Well, we don't know when we got Karen Rice's application. We don't know when we got Dell Hicks' application. So I've submitted my nominees. I know David Jackson. I like David Jackson. I talked to David Jackson. Had David applied, I certainly would have been fine serving with him on the commission. But at the same time, as I explained to him, I called Sidney Kuhn, I called Marlene Strube, and I called Sarah Freeman. I said, we have a shortage on this commission. Would you be willing to serve? And they agreed to serve. And out of respect for me, I think the board should allow me to continue to work with those three nominees, Sidney Kuhn, Marlene Strube, and Sarah Freeman. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. I do recall about the time we were going to meet in our special session, Mr. Kuhn did contact the clerk and advised he had been ill, had some type of surgery, and he was interested in serving on several commissions, and this was one of them, and I believe she forwarded that to the board. Hopefully my colleagues will remember that. I also look at the statute, or our charter that creates this commission. The purpose of the Historic Commission is established to provide, this is section 2-196, to provide for the development and preservation of historic documents, structures, areas, oral history, pictorial history, and other materials deemed essential to the historic significance of the city of Germantown. So once again, this commission is not a policy making commission. I have reviewed these applications. I concur with Alderman Massey's summation of Mrs. Freeman's qualifications. She is currently a professor of history at the Arkansas State University. She has degrees in history. She's a member of the Southern Historical Association since 1982. Has served with special exhibitions. She is a member of the Southern Association of Historians since 1983 and the Organization of American Historians since 1982. She's taught history at the college level for over 36 years and is published in her field since 1981. So I do believe she is qualified for this commission.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions, discussion on this particular item?
Sure, Mayor.
Alderman Massey.
So there's been a lot of talk since the election about unity and compromise, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for this board to put its best foot forward and show a little unity and compromise on my nominations. And I would like your support on that, Mayor.
I don't vote on this particular item. Any other comments? You have the floor.
You don't vote, but you give a lot of leadership to three aldermen up here, and I think they might follow your lead if you give a nod to them.
Contrary to public belief and your belief, I try to stay out of things. You have the floor. Are you concluded? Any other discussion or comments? Alderman Sanders.
I echo those comments by Alderman Massey. It is a perfect opportunity to show some compromise here on the board. I encourage my colleagues to consider that with the nature of this commission, and just ask that they would put personal opinions aside. Thank you.
Any other discussion or comments? Alderman Owens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My reasoning is simple. For the time that I have served with these two individuals, as well as I know Mr. Jackson, it is my belief, it is not personal, it's nothing against Ms. Strube or Mrs. Freeman. I just have been extremely pleased with the dedication and the service that both Karen and Ms. Hicks have given to this community. I think our chairman on the Historic Commission would echo those comments. And obviously Mr. Jackson's service as well. I mean, he was an alternate for the alderman position at one point too. He certainly has provided great leadership, and so I would argue that my picks here, or these picks that I have tonight, are for sound reasons, and that is the reason I picked them.
Any other questions, comments, discussion?
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes.
I think what I would like to have done is for the clerk to provide us with the information pertaining to these applications for those two nominees that Alderman Owens put forward, Karen Rice and Dale Hicks. I want to see some evidence of when you actually received those applications, because if they came in, you know, outside that timeline that we've required for other applicants, I think we need to go by the rules that we've set for other people. And at this point, I don't know when those applications came in, and I think it's only fair to these other applicants who had the votes postponed for us to know exactly when the clerk received those applications and how she received those applications.
Ms. Betty has provided the board with that already. Michelle, you take this, and I believe she went around individually to the board one-on-one prior to the meeting and explained exactly when these came in already individually to the board.
No, that's not true. It says, left on my desk, don't know who or when. That's what she provided us. There is no evidence of when this was provided.
Alderman, that was just for one.
And certainly we wouldn't be able to provide that evidence since we wouldn't know when that happened.
Well, if they didn't complete the application, we should know when they completed the application.
We're well past the original deadline. There were vacancies, so anyone who would come forward, I would think, would be willingly accepted by the board.
You didn't accept them when the two nominees, Sarah Freeman and Marlene Strube, when I asked you to add them to the agenda at our last meeting. You said that they got their applications in too late. Sarah Freeman got hers in a day after the deadline.
That was for it to be produced for your notebooks and presented to the public. There wasn't any other deadlines for the application similar to, I think, the November 30th deadline that's during the regular calendar year.
Mayor, the deadline for the last meeting was the 2nd. I did not receive any of these until after business time on the 2nd. That's why they were on the agenda for tonight.
Yeah, those are just procedural things. We can't get things in a packet and present it to the public. Your
well,
point of order is
we need to know when if they got them in that time frame, though.
Yeah, your point of order is heard, and we're going to move forward with the agenda item that we have in front of you this evening.
Mayor, I might be able to help in that regard.
Well, you don't have the floor, sir.
If you would allow me.
You want the floor? Would you have a point of order or a point of inquiry? You've already spoken twice.
I guess a point of inquiry.
So what
Mayor.
is that?
I was just pointing out to Alderman Massey that the Hicks application appears to have been dated January the 7th, and the Rice application January 3rd, so it might help answer his question.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this particular item? Please call the roll.
This is on the amendment?
That is correct.
Alderman Sanders?
No.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
The motion, the amendment passes. We welcome Dale Hicks, Karen Rice, David Jackson to the Historic Commission, and they currently already have a chairman in Jackie Cliff. Brings us to item 12 on the agenda, which was formerly on the consent agenda as item 10D, purchase GPAC theater seating. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to quote, first of all, a couple areas from the Germantown Forward 2030 plan that deals with providing exceptional spaces and that encourage civic engagement throughout our city. Also, part of the 2030 plan is the city's effort on a continual basis to invest in the entire infrastructure throughout our community, whether it's our civic spaces and buildings or our roads and our sewers and our storm drains. The city constantly looks to those areas where we need to replace and items and addresses those before they become problems, which I can tell you a lot of cities continue to put those things off and off and off, but we very aggressively address those through our infrastructure replacement program. This item before the board this evening is a budgeted item, and it will replace 127 seats at the Germantown Performing Arts Center. The original seats were installed, I was talking to Paul earlier, we opened the doors in '94, so they were in well before that. But we've got a lot of wear out of those seats, and it's time now to begin the replacement process, much like we did with the main stage curtains at GPAC. They're very expensive, and we can't do them all at once, so we try to phase those in, and that's exactly what we're doing with these seats. Rather than hitting the general fund with a rather massive purchase, we're phasing these in over time. We're going to be piggybacking on a Tennessee Cooperative Purchasing Network contract with Steve Ward and Associates in the amount of $65,514. The administration recommends, and this will replace the first set of rows in that area down front. And because these chairs are mounted to the back of the riser, we've had some issues with that as well. And so we'll be going through the entire theater and taking these existing chairs that we're going to be replacing and see if we can't find other chairs that were maybe perhaps an arm is broken after 25 years, or they just need some rehab to replace those chairs with the ones that we are removing if they're in worse condition. Again, the administration recommends approval of this budgeted item. Mr. Paul Chandler is here if the board has any questions from a theater operational standpoint of Paul, or I can certainly answer them from that standpoint as well, and also from a budgetary item.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to authorize the purchase of 127 seats and repair work to existing seats in the amount of $64,514 from Steve Ward and Associates for Germantown Performing Arts Center?
Move to approve.
Move to second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Alderman Yonda.
Yes, Mr. Chandler. We have in our budget for these seats right now, this is all we have the budget for. We're not replacing the other ones. We've got don't we have some projections for the next few years and how many seats we're going to replace?
So we have $65,000 in this year's budget. We've earmarked $40,000 in next year's budget.
Okay.
After we go through this first step, we will understand how the parts and the chairs that we remove will help us fix the other ones in the house, which should lengthen the time period, but eventually they'll all need to be replaced due to the way that they were installed.
Right. And most of them are the 24 years old or whatever it is?
Every one of them.
Yeah. And you're going to be replacing some of the better ones that you're taking away and putting them where other locations might have a problem?
Correct.
Okay. I'm good with it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any more discussion, questions? Alderman Massey.
Sure, Mayor. So, Mr. Chandler, I am not here to debate the merits of the value of the performances to the people who see them. As I said in the executive session, I was contacted by one of our citizens, actually several citizens, but the one that really struck home to me was an elderly lady who reminded me of how much money we have been giving to GPAC. And again, I'm not debating whether or not GPAC is really nice and people enjoy the performances and that some people get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But she said, I can't afford to attend these shows. She said, and there are a lot of people out here like me. We can go to a park for free. We can't go to GPAC. Even if I could afford a ticket, I might not be able to buy the shoes, buy the dress, buy those nice things to be able to feel comfortable attending those events. And I understand that's part of what we deal with in society. But like I said earlier, at some point, I think we have to look to GPAC to be self-sustaining, so that we're not giving millions of dollars in support each year. And we recognize it's unlike our utilities, unlike the Great Hall, and unlike the Germantown Athletic Club. It's not an enterprise fund where we expect it to make money or at least not be dependent upon the city. It's a private nonprofit, correct?
The nonprofit manages the program that occurs within the facility.
Yeah, but okay, so y'all get the ticket receipts, though. The GPAC gets the ticket receipts.
Is that a question?
It is a question.
Yes. Yes.
And the building itself is sustained by tax money, right?
By the city of Germantown, yes.
Right. And so it just seems to some people that we are providing possibly too much support. And I think at this point, they may be right. And I'm not sure how much accountability GPAC has to the city. Now, granted, I know we can go and we can look at the nonprofit filings, but at the same time, there's really no oversight from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And
can I say we're kind of getting off what this whole budget is? It's not.
Alderman Yonda, do you have either a point of order or a point of inquiry?
I don't know if this is a point of order or germane to
What's your point of order?
Point of order is that we're making a decision on $64,000 here. We're not making a decision on whether people like or dislike GPAC.
Well, thank you, Alderman. I would kind of concur that Alderman Massey can continue with this questioning, but please keep it to the subject matter.
Sure. I think in closing, Mr. Chandler, I support you. I support GPAC. My family loves every show that we attend, but there are a lot of people who have serious reservations about the amount of money that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen continues to give to GPAC. So that's it.
Any other questions or discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
I just had an inquiry of the city administrator. If my math is correct, with the number of seats and the number we're replacing, we're going to have another 687 to go. If we incurred the same cost, which would be unlikely if we're going to carry it over a number of years, that's about $349,000. So is this something that should go in capital improvements budget, or
it's identified in the infrastructure replacement budget because it wouldn't rise to the definition of what is true capital
need, right?
Yeah, even though we've got they could, because we got 25 years out of these chairs, but it doesn't really fit that definition. This is replacement of an existing asset, and that's why it falls. If you notice, Alderman Sanders, on the funding page where it says line item, that IRP down below the line item number references the project number in our long-range 10-year infrastructure replacement plan.
So is the additional amount of roughly $349,000, is that already in the IRP for future years? I know we do budgets 5 years
We're
out.
identifying it, but again, you only appropriate dollars to actually be spent one
Correct.
fiscal year at a time. We like to plan for those things so we can see long-term what's going to be confronting us. And as Mr. Chandler said, we've identified how many more chairs? 40? 40,000 in next year's IRP to continue this process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? That concludes debate on this particular item. Any closing remarks from staff, administration?
Mayor, just a couple things. I would stress that we are not.
Point of order.
Yes.
I think last year we decided that staff was not going to speak outside the normal limits of debate. I don't mind suspending the rules to allow Mr. Lawton to enter his comments, but going forward, I think we need to.
The debate has been concluded. I just announced that. So continue, Mr. Lawton.
Thank you.
But he's commenting on this issue, correct?
The debate is concluded. You've concluded your debate. He has some closing remarks.
Yeah, but Mayor.
This is not a debate with the administration.
Well, it is because we're not allowed to comment.
He's not debating the board.
Then he shouldn't be allowed to speak because we can't comment. You're giving him greater rights than we have as aldermen.
He doesn't have any rights. He doesn't get to vote. You have all the rights. You get to vote. Continue your comments, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to stress that the Germantown Performing Arts Center is an operation that is operated, and most of the funding comes from the city's general fund. It is a huge amenity to the city. It would not have been built in 1990, well, actually it was shelled in 1990 and opened in 1993 had there not been widespread community support for this endeavor. GPAC is truly an amenity that adds to the quality of life in our community, and if there are people who have questions about what we spend on this, Mayor and Board, please have them contact me and we can go over exactly what the financials look like. GPAC is audited on an annual basis by an outside auditing firm, and that audit is presented to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen per the agreement between the city and the Germantown Performing Arts Center Board of Directors. That audit was completed last fall, and the board was provided with a copy of that. In terms of overall community support, this entity raised over $2 million to support the construction of the Grove, and I think that gives the board some idea of the kind of support within the community and within the corporate world where a lot of our folks live in or work in to support this effort. The 501c3 is in place to help guide with the programming. It's outstanding programming, and if it wasn't for the support of the 501c3 to help underwrite the amount of the tickets, and not the amount of the tickets, but the price per ticket, they would be much higher than what they are. Unlike a lot of other areas, there are enterprise funds that are self-supporting, but you do not have to be a member of those to support that. If you can't afford the membership to be at the Germantown Athletic Club, then you don't have to be a member of that. There are things in this community where people can pick and choose the amenities that they want to support and get behind, either in direct support as a ticket buyer or in donations, as we saw this evening. So, Mayor, those are my comments.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Motion carries. We look forward to those seats being replaced. They had a good run, no pun intended, with the performing arts, but a quarter of a century to use that, especially with 100,000 people going through those doors on an annual basis. You're a good steward of our financial dollars, so please take good care of them like you always do. Thank you. Takes us to item number 13 on the agenda this evening. City Attorney Agreement. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. At that December 18th meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, when you appointed the boards and commissions, the city attorney at that time, Mr. David Harris, presented his slate of attorneys to fill various positions, from prosecuting attorneys to the attorneys that staff our various boards and commission. At that time, at that meeting, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved that slate of of attorneys rather, and also agreed to appoint, per the city's charter, Mr. John R. McCarroll III with Birchport and Johnson to serve as the city's lead city attorney, again as identified by charter. Mac, as we call him, Mac McCarroll, is here this evening, and he's sitting in as a city attorney. We've had a long relationship with Birchport and Johnson in providing legal services for the community going back to, I believe, approximately 1991, 90 or 91 with this firm, and during that period of time up to present, the city has appointed one of the attorneys from that firm, whether it was Mr. Cates, who served for a long term, Debbie Wiles, David Harris, and now Mac McCarroll in this position. We have had during this period of time up until this evening in a proposed recommendation a retainer with the firm to provide legal services for the city, with the city attorney being the lead individual from that firm. The administration, in conversations with the city attorney's office and with Birchport and Johnson, is recommending a change to that, and we're recommending moving from the monthly retainer of $22,000 a month, or $264,000 a year, to legal services agreement that will be based on an hourly rate. $250 per hour for the senior attorneys, $200 for associates, and 110 hours for the legal staff. The administration has records going back a number of years where we can show you what that retainer amount looks like and what we've paid for additional litigation, for FOI compliance, for the attorney work associated with the various pilots that come our way. And those have exceeded the $264,000. The pilots, however, we will be reimbursed for those attorney fees because the agreement with, let's say, it's Mid-America Apartments, they are required to reimburse the city for those legal fees. When we receive the retainer to be paid on a monthly basis, it's just that. It's a retainer. When we use the legal services or not, we may not use them that month. It's still the $22,000 retainer that we pay the firm in addition to the other areas. So the administration feels that going to an hourly rate in monitoring our legal spend in this area is going to be advantageous to the city and to the public, because we'll be able to see much more closely exactly where we're spending our dollars in each department and how much time we are allocating with the firm in discussing legal issues. So the administration recommends approval of this agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to approve the attached city attorney agreement among the City of Germantown, John R. McCarroll III, and Birch, Porter & Johnson, PLLC? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any discussion on this particular item? Alderman Yonda.
Yes, Mr. Lawton, I would ask, and I realize it's hard to come up with the number in terms of budgets, et cetera, but I would ask that as we proceed with this, that we get quarterly reports that will tell us where we are so we know that this is what's going on.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we'll begin that this year. The entire retainer was encumbered at the beginning of the fiscal year, but we will unencumber that amount and start the hourly billing process now.
Well, I don't know if you remember when we were only paying him $14,000, I thought an hourly rate might be cheaper, but then we had several things going on. But I think it's important that we don't really have a budget item for this, the way it's set up, but it's probably going to come in less than our 22 times 12 is what you're saying, or which we're hoping for. Is that correct?
Yes, Alderman Yonda. What you'll probably see in the budget this year is $350,000 in the budget for legal expense. I believe that's what's in there in FY20. Based on our experience going forward in FY20, we'll have a better understanding of how much we're spending. The other thing that we're going to do right now, all those dollars are incorporated in within the administration's budget. I'm going to divide those up with the various departments, our heavy users, if you will, of legal services, whether it's procurement, economic and community development, HR, administration, and have those department heads be responsible for tracking those hourly fees. So because it's not on a retainer, it's a lot easier, or we will be much more careful looking at that instead of just picking up the phone and calling legal. These departments will be responsible for managing those, their portion of that entire pie.
So you're going to separate them out in individual GL accounting, but under the guidance, under the heading of
legal services.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's good. I'll be voting yes for this.
Any other discussion on this particular? Alderman Owens.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I do, you know, like any change, I guess I have just a little bit of concern going from this, but I think it's an opportunity for us. So we might have the ability to save some money. I do have, and certainly no concerns about our council. I think they provided us excellent legal advice, but I feel better knowing that our sister city to the east, Collierville, is utilizing this same arrangement, and that they seem to be working, it works well for them. And I also think, kind of like what you talked about, Mr. Lawton, that, you know, our department heads may be used to or comfortable with just just picking up the phone and saying, hey, I don't know the answer to this, but now that they know that we're being billed at an hourly rate, they might be able to find the answers some other way, not to give you any less business, Mac.
And no offense, Mac, but all of our phones also have a little timer when,
yes.
when they pick up the receiver.
What's the,
so the clock starts running.
That's right, that's right. Are we committing to a year here for this? No.
I'll let Mac respond to that.
The agreement is that we serve at the pleasure of the board, and we can be terminated at any time.
Right, that's what I thought.
We could terminate it at any time. The board can terminate it at any time. So it's up to the board.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I think we could get 3 months, 6 months in, and if it just seems, I mean, that's not a really span enough time to I guess take a real hard look at it. But yeah, I'm hopeful we can save some money in this situation. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Alderman Massey.
Sure. Attorney McCarroll, if my vote tonight were based on whether or not I think you should be our city attorney, my answer would be yes. My vote tonight will be based on whether or not this is a prudent financial decision for the city. And as I said during the executive session, we simply don't have enough historical data, and we don't have enough data about the projections for me to feel comfortable making the decision to go from the current payment schedule to a new payment schedule. So until I can get comfortable with this, and it shouldn't be very hard for the city administrator to do, he should be able to pull the amount of time that was spent by our attorneys reviewing city issues and tell the board whether or not, in fact, this is going to be a good financial decision, because what we have right now is that it could work out, but it could also not work out. And I can't cast my vote tonight without some assurance that it actually will work out. It would be irresponsible of me as an alderman to do that. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
I too had a concern that we needed to look out for the taxpayer and make sure this was a reasonable and prudent decision. I don't have the figures in front of me, Mr. Massey, but I did ask the city administrator some questions. He provided some figures for me that made me comfortable enough to know that that we're making a decision that would hopefully benefit our taxpayers. But the reason I say hopefully, we never know what kind of suits will be coming, what kind of issues are going to arise. So granted, the information that Mr. Lawton provided me, I believe, was just last year's amounts that we had spent and some general categories that it was in. I felt like, and knowing that this could be renegotiated or canceled at a later time, I took that information at heart, and I think that I could support this, but I just provide that for information.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions on this particular item?
Well, Mayor, I guess I would have one other question.
Sure.
If there is this empirical data, which wasn't mentioned during the executive session, frankly, and apparently wasn't shared with the rest of the board, it would have made sense to put that in the packet. And I would just like to know what the information is that makes Alderman Sanders comfortable with this decision, because, at the end of the day, when things go wrong, what one alderman discusses with the city administrator doesn't create the record. And so everybody's going to be pointing the finger at somebody else and saying, well, it was a good guess. I hate that things went wrong, but that's just what happened. And the citizens are going to be left wondering how we reached our conclusions about this being the best thing for the city. And as of right now, I haven't seen anything that conclusively leads me to believe that this is a good decision for the city of Germantown financially. It sounds a whole lot like guessing, and from a person that's been in business for a long time, I just don't like guessing on things.
Any other questions on this particular item? That concludes debate and discussion on this item. Any Concluding remarks by staff?
Yes, Mayor. Just a couple things.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes.
Once again, you are allowing conversations to continue outside of debate. It robs us as aldermen of the opportunity to respond and interject on behalf of the people. He's an unelected official, and he works for you. He carries your voice, and it's unfair to the citizens at home for their elected representatives not to be able to speak on their behalf. So I am going to ask you again not to allow this to happen.
Your point of order is taken and is overruled.
I'm going to appeal that decision to the rest of the board.
Do you have a point of order?
I just made a motion to appeal to the rest of the board. You have to, we are going to take a vote.
Alderman Massey, I've already concluded debate and discussion on this item.
Mayor, you don't have a choice in this. I just asked to appeal to the board.
I do have a choice on this. I'm the chair of this board.
No, you don't. You have to recuse yourself because this pertains to your decision, Mayor. We're going to vote on whether or not your decision was correct. You have 3 aldermen. I know they'll vote in your favor, but we're still going to go through the process and take the vote.
The chair recognizes folks and then also makes a judgment. I'm not granting your point of order. Conclude your remarks.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. The City of Germantown has had a long outstanding history with the firm of Birch, Porter & Johnson. It goes back, as I said, to the early 90s at a time when the City of Germantown did not have an attorney to fill that spot. At that time, I was directed to go out and recruit for a full-time city attorney. Based on the information I provided the board, mayor, and aldermen at that time, having a city attorney, a full-time city attorney, would have been too expensive for the city, and decided to continue the relationship with Birch, Porter & Johnson. A couple things I'd like to point out is not only are we getting the Mac McCarroll to serve as our city attorney, but we also have the full weight of the entire firm of Birch, Porter & Johnson, who we've developed over the past 25 years, an outstanding relationship, whether it's in procurement, information, and practices, whether it's in HR and human resources. I can tell you that relationship has probably caused the city and our residents hundreds of thousands of dollars in proper legal advice to make sure that we look out. And that's one of our primary responsibilities. One of this board's primary responsibilities is to reduce the risk upon the city and upon the citizens. In terms of costs associated with this, litigation can be all over the place in any particular year. You all remember we spent well close to $150,000 on the inland litigation suit. We did not see that lawsuit coming. Maybe we did because we had horrible service from them, and we should have sued them if anybody, but they filed suit against the city, and we had to defend that lawsuit, and it turned out rather expensive, but we have better service at the end. So there's the retainer at $22,000 a month or $264,000 a year, but then there's this unknown, the litigation that we're always going to be, or sometimes hit with during the year. The total this year with the retainer, in FY18 was $417,000 approximately, is the information I provided Alderman Sanders. $264,000 was the retainer. So the rest of that is what we've paid on an hourly basis for a number of things that are beyond our control. Our FOI request that we have not collected on totals close to $35,000. There's a number of things with the IDBs, as I'd mentioned, whether it's Mid-America Pilot, ThyssenKrupp, or the Campbell Clinic, total close to, I think, about $65,000. Now, we will be reimbursed for those expenses. That's part of the agreement when we work with their companies on processing pilots. So I believe that this is in the best interest of the city and with city staff, and continuing this relationship, with Birch, Porter & Johnson and Mac McCarroll as our city attorney. But I think from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, of being able to look at these costs and control these more closely. And I like Alderman Yonda's comment about reporting back to this body on a quarterly basis to let you know how we're doing in our legal services.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. I'll just conclude with saying that over the last few years, we've taken a hard look at...
Point of order, Mayor. Point of order, Mayor.
What is your point of order?
Again, we've already closed debate, and you're stepping in the
I'm not debating.
comments.
I'm making a presentation. That's what you expect from your staff. And your
Well, it should come
administration.
before we debate, Mayor. How can we debate
We're
or
not
discuss anything that staff says
You're not
if you do it
debating.
at the end? This is specifically designed.
You're not debating
You're not a
us.
king.
You're not debating.
You're not a
us.
king.
Well, I agree with that. I'm
Okay,
debating.
let's start giving your presentations first.
The,
Point of
in the
order, Mayor.
concluding- Yes.
I tend to agree that these statements could be made in the early presentation. You're putting aldermen at a disadvantage. You may say something that we needed to consider or discuss in our dialogue prior to taking the vote.
This is just concluding remarks. It's not meant to sway anyone. It's just a statement or whatnot. So we've looked at over the last couple of years bringing in the service of attorney in-house and bringing a legal division and hiring attorneys. Also, we've looked at the model of the hourly rate as well. We've had a lot of discussion with our friends in the town of Collierville as well. And hopefully this model will be one that we can look at for years to come. But if not, we can return to a retainer and we can judge that as it comes. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
The measure passes, and staff and administration does appreciate the support of the board. We also appreciate the aldermen that take the time to contact the board and get information to help with their decision. We've reached the conclusion of our business this evening. I would be remiss that Alderman Owens' mother's in attendance, and she asked me, does Lakeland not require ties in Lakeland?
Oh, no.
We are adjourned.